Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've been seeing headlines about a new US-China trade deal, you're probably wondering, is this really a big deal or just another headline without much substance? On the surface, it might sound like a major breakthrough. After all, we're talking about two of the biggest economies in the world trying to mend fences after years of tension. But if you take a closer look, what's being called a deal might not be what it seems, and it could have real effects on prices, jobs, and how American businesses make decisions moving forward. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. What the US is calling a trade deal is, according to China, more of a promise to keep talking. That's a big difference. So today, let's break down what we know so far, what both sides are saying about this agreement, and what it really means for you. Whether you're working, retired, running a small business, or just trying to make sense of the news. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments how you feel about the US approach to trade with China. Do you think these negotiations help, hurt, or are they just political theater? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy thoughtful breakdowns like this one, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Now, here's what happened. On May 11th, after 2 days of meetings in Geneva, the White House announced that it had reached what it called a China trade deal. The statement came from top Trump officials, including U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. They described the outcome as a substantial step forward, reflecting a mutual desire to cooperate and reduce tensions. Sounds encouraging, right? But here's where it gets interesting. While the U.S. side called it a deal, China described it very differently. Chinese Vice Premier Ha Lifeng didn't say anything about a finalized agreement. Instead, he spoke about setting up what's called a consultation mechanism, which is essentially an agreement to keep talking. No legal binding terms, no specific tariffs rolled back, no immediate changes to how businesses operate. So, what exactly is a consultation mechanism? Think of it like a regular check-in between two people who've had a big argument. They agree to meet, talk, and try to work through things over time. But it's not a contract, and it doesn't guarantee results. That's where the disconnect lies. The Trump administration framed this as a clear win, something they could take back to the American public and say, "See, our tough stance is working." But China's response was much more reserved and vague. This isn't the first time the US and China have agreed to talk more. Past efforts like the Strategic Economic Dialogue or the Comprehensive Economic Dialogue were meant to improve trade relations and solve disputes. But most of them fizzled out when tensions flared again. So, is this new deal any different? Well, that depends on what happens next. Right now, there are no published terms, no schedules for tariff cuts, and no clear agreements on major issues like intellectual property or state subsidies. These are the core issues that caused the trade war in the first place. Let's rewind a bit. Remember when President Trump imposed a massive 145% tariff on Chinese imports? That alone froze nearly $600 billion in trade between the two countries. China retaliated with its own 125% tariffs, and suddenly the world's two largest economies were barely trading with each other. That affected everything from smartphone prices to auto parts, and the impact was felt immediately. Prices went up. Some businesses laid off workers, and global supply chains had to adjust fast. So for President Trump, this announcement comes at a politically useful time. especially after he just signed a smaller trade agreement with the UK, easing tariffs on British cars. These moments are meant to show the White House pushing forward on tough negotiations and getting results. But again, what's actually changed so far? Nothing concrete. There's been no rollback of tariffs, no new access for U.S. companies in Chinese markets, and no changes to intellectual property rules, which has been a huge sticking point in past negotiations. That's why many trade experts are urging caution. Some say this is more of a symbolic win, useful for headlines and politics, but not yet a win for workers, consumers, or business owners. Also, China's careful language here is important. When one country calls it a deal and the other calls it a dialogue mechanism, it suggests that the two sides may not even agree on what was actually agreed upon. If you've ever been in a negotiation where you thought you settled something, only to find out the other person saw it differently, you can understand how this feels. Does this mean the whole thing is meaningless? Not necessarily. Even just restarting dialogue is better than having no communication at all. When the US and China aren't talking, tensions rise, and that creates uncertainty. Something businesses really don't like. For example, imagine a US-based electronics company that relies on Chinese parts. If they believe tariffs might suddenly go up again, they'll hesitate to invest. They might delay hiring or pass those extra costs on to consumers. So, even a hint of stability in trade relations can bring some relief. On top of that, if this consultation process leads to real progress, like a phased rollback of tariffs or more cooperation on tech regulations, then this announcement could turn into something more meaningful over time. But for now, markets are watching closely. Investors won't shift strategies until they see real terms, and manufacturers are going to wait for more clarity before changing supply chains or making big bets on exports. That's the key takeaway here. Right now, this deal is more of a political signal than an economic shift. Still, it opens a door. And in global trade, especially between the US and China, even having the door cracked open is better than having it slammed shut. But let me ask you, if you were running a business that relied on international trade, how would you react to this news? Would you feel reassured or more confused? Let me know in the comments. A lot of us are wondering whether we're seeing a turning point or just a pause in a much bigger struggle. And here's one last thing to consider. Trade policy often gets framed as something that only affects big corporations or politicians. But the truth is, it touches all of us. When tariffs go up, prices can rise. When talks break down, jobs can be at risk. When companies can't plan ahead, wages and growth can stagnate. That's why deals like this matter, and why it's important to look past the headlines and understand what's really happening. To recap, the US announced a trade deal with China, but based on what's been released so far, it looks more like an agreement to keep talking. That could change once the full details are made public. Whether this turns into a real agreement down the road is still up in the air. If you found this breakdown helpful, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for more clear explanations of the financial news that affects you. Thanks for spending time with me today. Stay thoughtful, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.